Hello and welcome to Japan Expert Insights and our Wednesday morning room with Tim Sullivan and me, Maya Matsuoka, as your hosts and moderators. In this podcast, we welcome comments, questions, and opinions. So if you haven't done so yet, join us next time on Clubhouse. In the meantime, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel, where we upload all the conversations on Japanese politics, business insights, and Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific region. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Wednesday. It's a working day here in Japan, and we appreciate your time, your being with us. Today, once again, we have Kyotako, author of Japanese folk tales. Today, we're going to talk about the father of Japanese capitalism and more about the turns of fate and what made him so successful and such a prominent figure in Japanese history. So let's enjoy the conversation without any further ado. Kyota, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maya. All right, so I decided to. Maya and Tim have kindly offered that I have a monthly session here. Thank you very much for that. And I was thinking what would be a nice theme to talk about every time. And I've been thinking, okay, so I'm studying Japanese history, culture, folk tales, of course, every day. And there's something I have found that there's one thing in common among everything I read is that I see a prominent personality type behind all these stories and historical figures, the life stories of historical figures, and the manifestation of Japanese culture. And I thought maybe we could capitalize on that, finding out what kind of personality Japan has. And I'm titling this series Facepalming Lessons because most of them are facepalming. It's a series of trial and error. Japanese history is, like any other history of the world, it's a series of trial and error. But we see people who are I don't want to say stereotypical, but they share this trait. They share this personality trait. People who we see in history, they share a personality trait. And I thought maybe today I'd start with the first one. And Shibusawa Eiichi, he's been very popular lately. So I figured he is a good example of how having a Japanese personality could lead to success, at least in Japan. So anyway, I'd like to discuss what seems to be a type of personality that is very important in Japanese society. And this is called sunao. The personality trait is called sunao. And I think this often becomes the make or break trait that, for example, lets you pass job interviews. Like you have this trait and you pass job interviews in Japan. It's that important. So, like many other Japanese words, sunao, it doesn't translate completely into any single English word. It can be translated into docile, differential, and accepting. It can also mean submissive and obedient. So it's basically a word that describes a person who doesn't question authority. He would listen attentively to his elders. He would just put in the work needed to get things done without complaining. And also, this person would accept new ideas readily. He's open to new ideas. So being sunao means you're like a sponge. Okay, so this is a very important trait in Japan, it seems. And many children, not all, many children are born sunao. But as they grow, they accumulate, I'd say, like gunk from the not so nice things people around them say, or from bitter experiences at school or at work, and they lose their sunaoness. But some of them eventually realize that if they want to make their lives better, they need to regain their sunaoness. And that's basically a quick overview of my life so far. So I feel I started living a happy life around the time I started working on being sunao. And as I studied different people's lives in Japanese history, I noticed that many of the historical figures who died old and happy seem to have had that turning point where their lives started picking up positively when they exerted sunauness. So maybe if I continue, I can die old and happy. So I'd like to share the story of Shibusawa Eiichi. In Japan, again, as Mary mentioned, he is known to be the father of Japanese capitalism. We'll find out what that means. He lived between 1840 and 1931, which means he lived to see the end of the Tokugawa samurai government that had lasted 260 years. He also saw Japan's modernization. To be exact, he is much responsible for Japan's modernization. And at first, Eiichi was a young farmer who was anti-samurai rule and anti-West. And he hated samurai and Westerners. Then he became a samurai himself to serve the last shogun. So he's like contradicting himself. Then he traveled to Europe to learn about capitalism, governance, industrialization, economy from the West. And he loved it. And then when he came back to Japan after 2 years, the shogun had been overthrown. And the samurai class, which is the class he was in, had been abolished. I don't know if you're familiar with the folk tale Urashima Taro, but in Japan, we call this kind of event where you travel abroad for a certain amount of time and then you come back and things are totally different. It's called the Urashima Taro effect. Anyway, so he was headhunted into the new imperial government where he worked as a high government official after he came back. And then he quit the government to become an entrepreneur and establish the first bank in Japan and over 500 other companies. And then he died. So his accomplishments are incredible, but I'd like to focus today on how he had a big change of heart several times in his life. I think we all do, I think we all have. Otherwise, we wouldn't have developed ourselves as a person, and we wouldn't be the people we are now. But Shibusawa Eiichi is a big deal because he had really big changes of heart, like 180 degrees. And he, in fact, ended up being the greatest entrepreneur modern Japan has ever had. So, to promote his greatness further, in 2024, he will be, like 2 years later, right? He will be the face of the new 10,000 yen notes. He will replace Fukuzawa Yukichi. There are many kinds of success, I think, but you cannot be the face of a Japanese banknote without being successful in a way all Japanese people would approve of. And from reading about his life story, I can confidently say that being Snow is what got him to be on those 10,000 yen notes. So let me go over what Shibusawa Eiichi went through before becoming the father of Japanese capitalism. Okay, so here's his life story. So Eiichi was born into a wealthy farmer's household in what is now Saitama Prefecture, right next to Tokyo. And his house is still there. So you can visit there if you want. And his father was talented in business. He liked educating himself. He liked reading and was well respected by his neighbors. His mother was also an altruistic woman. And his father was keen on educating all his children, particularly on Confucian thought. So Eiichi was born privileged. But he realized in his teens that he wasn't as privileged as samurai. So just to give you an overview of the relationship between farmers and samurai during the Tokugawa samurai rule. From the farmer's point of view, in general, samurai during this time were dependents to society who couldn't produce anything themselves, and they demanded rice every year in the form of tax. They took like 60% of the crop yield and didn't pay anything to the farmers for their labor. And one day, when Eiichi was 17, this was in 1856, the local samurai clan that was in power around the Saitama area demanded wealthy farmers like Eiichi's family to pay up almost $300,000 suddenly. Why? Because they ran out of money, right? So they're not very good at finances. Like most samurai in Japan were not good at finances. So Eiichi had to visit these arrogant beggars at their offices, and they would have tantrums when Eiichi showed disrespect because, to his eyes, to young Eiichi's eyes, they didn't deserve any respect. The samurai he met there was clearly less intelligent than his father or his brothers, and this samurai was bullying farmers who actually fed him and was going to lend him money he couldn't return. So Eiichi felt the whole system of classism was stupid and that he wanted the samurai governance to end one day. And just around this time, American steamboats were coming to Japan, coming to Yokohama and near Tokyo, and they were pressuring Japan to open up for trade. The imperial court, representing the emperor, ordered the samurai government to kick Westerners out, but the government ignored the decree. The samurai government was much more aware of how big a power the industrialized West possessed. So basically, it was the imperial court not knowing what they were demanding. But anyway, the general public started doubting the credibility of the samurai government because they were being very submissive to the West. So things escalated, and some extremists started wanting two things all around Japan. Number one, the emperor to assume control over Japan like the ancient times. And number two, they wanted Japan to expel Western influence. So these two things were what the extremists really, really wanted to see. And Eiichi became one of those extremists because he is now, right? He accepts new ideas readily. And the cousins and friends he hung out with all the time became extremists, so naturally Eiichi followed. Okay. And they planned a raid on the city of Yokohama. And they planned to burn Yokohama down, and kill any foreigners they saw. It's because Yokohama was the port city where most foreign merchants and diplomats lived. And Eiichi and his gang spent what would be in today's money over $80,000 to procure spears and swords. So they were actually serious about this terrorism. But then his childhood teacher / elder cousin just came back from Kyoto and told Eiichi that his plan was not going to work. He had seen at least two similar attempts by extremists in Kyoto, and they all got killed off. They got killed off by the local police very easily. And this guy who saw all that firsthand was saying it's not going to work, not even a chance. So Eiichi conceded with a heavy heart, probably because he was taught Confucianism, and in Confucianism, respecting your elders and teachers is a must. And this guy was in fact an elder and his teacher. So Eiichi listened and canceled the plan. Much later on his life, he admitted that that plan was utterly ridiculous, and his life would have ended right there if he had seen it through. Actually, one of his cousins saw through another terrorism act, and he was killed. So Confucianism definitely has a lot to do with Eiichi's being a good boy. And he seemed to have been very sunao toward people he respected, people whom he knew were more intelligent than he was. So that was his first small turning point in life where being sunao saved his butt. I wonder if anyone here has experienced any self-butt saving by listening to people who knew better. Like something like, if I hadn't listened to that guy back then, I would not have been this happy today, or I wouldn't have been here today. I wonder if anyone has that kind of experience. I don't know if Tim has one. In my case, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's with my spouse.
Okay.
When she tells me I'm wrong, most of the time I'm wrong. So I have to, accept it.
I've seen stand-up jokes saying something similar. It's like, right, you're, I don't know, I think it was, I forgot his name, but he was giving a PowerPoint presentation. I think he's selling himself as a geek comedian, and then he gives all these Venn diagrams and charts on PowerPoint slides, and he was saying, he was like showing a matrix, and then on the rows it was like me and spouse, and then on the columns it was me and spouse, and then it's like right, wrong, right. So even if you're always wrong when your wife is right. If your wife is wrong, everything's wrong. That's how things work.
Yeah, I think I saw that guy. His funniest chart was when his wife goes shopping. She goes to the mall, and he has a diagram of every shop she goes to buy one thing. And his is he just goes there, decides what he wants, and buys it and leaves. And So that guy's hilarious. I can't remember his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, I follow him on Instagram. Right. Yeah, I think I had that too. A long time ago, I was very critical of, because I was young and then I thought I was smart, and I would be watching TV and I see these people who are target of criticism, and then I joined the criticism, and then I kept doing that, and then my wife just pointed out one day, it's that I think it's something she learned from her father or something, but she said, if you criticize people, the criticism will come back to you. And then that's when I thought, yeah, I think maybe she's right. And that's when I trying to stop doing that. I came back later, some years ago, but yeah, I think it's helped to have listened to her, being Sunao, and having listened to her and thinking what that message really, really means or will mean to you, and accepting it and trying it out, living the idea. So, all right. So back to Eiichi's life. After his failed terrorism debut, Eiichi moved to Kyoto because he was afraid the police would try to arrest him if he had stayed near Edo. So he was thinking he's a high-profile terrorist right now. And Edo is the old name of Tokyo, by the way. And he visited an acquaintance of his called Hiraoka-san. Hiraoka-san was a samurai who served a future shogun candidate called Hitotsubashi Yoshinobu. And Hiraoka-san knew about Eiichi's terrorism attempt, but he saw potential in him. He thought that he could, if he served our clan, I think he would make things happen. So he tried to talk Eiichi into working under him, and Eiichi, of course, didn't respond positively at first. But again, this guy is elder, and he clearly knows the world better. So Eiichi eventually conceded, joined the Hitotsubashi samurai clan, and became a samurai himself formally. Okay, so Eiichi was Sunao, but also very smart and hardworking. So he got promoted very quickly and became like the finance minister of the Hitotsubashi samurai clan. And he built trust in the clan so much that he became a close advisor to Hitotsubashi Yoshinobu, the clan master himself, in a matter of like 2 years or something. And then in 1866, the 14th shogun died of illness. His name was Tokugawa Iemochi. He died very young. He liked eating sweets, and he had, I don't know, all his teeth were decayed, and he was found. His bones were found, and so he died. And Eiichi's clan master Hitotsubashi Yoshinobu was appointed as the next shogun and became Tokugawa Yoshinobu, the 15th shogun. That automatically turned Eiichi into a trusted staffer of the king of Japan, basically. So he found himself in a position to actually make an impactful difference in Japan. But his greatest turning point was not even that. In 1867, samurai ruled Japan decided to participate in the Paris Expo, which was, of course, going to be held in Paris. So, along with 20 or so other assignees, Eiichi was ordered to accompany the group as an accountant. Again, it's his Sunao-ness that made him say, "Hai, gamarimasu," which is the Japanese for "yes, sir, will do." And because he would actually make results, his supervisor would give him all sorts of opportunities, and the Paris Expo was one of them. So Eiichi used to be anti-West, but the moment he was assigned to this journey to Paris, he was like, oh, then I need to learn French. So he's very Sunao, right? He started studying. So this ex-farmer boy / ex-Mr. Terrorism attempt boarded a ship that set off from Yokohama, stopped by Shanghai, Hong Kong, Saigon, Singapore, I think Sri Lanka, sailed through the Suez Canal, and came to Marseille, Lyon, and then Paris. So counting from the year he planned to set Yokohama on fire, all this was just a matter of 5 or 6 years. Incredible. So after Team Japan was done with the Paris Expo, they traveled around Europe to learn about Western politics, governance, industrialization, and economics. And Eiichi was, again, a sponge. So you can imagine how much he absorbed from traveling to Switzerland, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, and England. So he was on this epic study abroad for 2 years. So Eiichi was having the time of his life, but in 1867, he received news that his boss, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, the shogun, had resigned. he forfeited his position as shogun to the imperial court. So the imperial court, or the emperor, became the king of Japan. I'm not going to go into details about this because we're most interested in Eiichi today. So basically, when Eiichi came back to Japan, he was no longer samurai because that class itself was gone, was no more. So he became a regular person, and he decided to go live and work under the ex-shogun Yoshinobu, who was completely bummed out in his hometown in Shizuoka. So he went to live with him, along with many of his ex-staffers, because they didn't know what to do. Again, samurai didn't know how to produce anything, right? So they're mostly unemployed people who are incredibly good at the sword, but nothing else. So Eiichi could not thank this ex-shogun more because it's thanks to his assigning Eiichi to this journey to Europe that he now had so much knowledge and so many ideas he wanted to try out in Japan. So Eiichi actually sets up something very close to a corporation in Shizuoka to make sure his bummed out boss would have a steady passive income. He's a really nice guy. And he was doing so well with this business, this new business, that the new imperial government heard about it, and they wanted to headhunt Eiichi. But Eiichi had promised to himself that he was going to serve Yoshinobu for life. He is the very reason he got to be the person he is now. So Eiichi went to Tokyo to decline this offer. By this time, Tokyo was called Tokyo because the samurai government was overthrown, and the emperor moved from Kyoto to Tokyo. Kyoto in Japanese literally means capital of capitals. Capital. Kyoto is capital. And Tokyo literally means east capital. Right? So that was the new capital. Anyway, Eiichi went to Tokyo in order to politely decline the job offer. But the government official who called him in, he was the future prime minister, Okuma Shigenobu. But he was super smart, and he talked Eiichi into accepting the job. And Eiichi was being sunao again, and he accepted the job. So he started working as a government officer of the imperial government that overthrew the samurai government. So Eiichi worked for the government for around 3 years, and within those 3 years, he fixed the tax and currency laws. He set up transportation infrastructure, many roads, and did all these things that contributed to building the foundation of modern Japan. And then he quit. He was done. He was done being a sunao employee. He had experienced everything he needed to experience to do what he really wanted to do. So he had grown his network with his sunao personality and knew all sorts of people with power, money, and goodwill. And this guy's still 33 at this point. Incredible. Okay. So the first thing he did was to set up Daiichi National Bank, which was the old name of what's Mizuho Bank right now. Even I have a bank account on Mizuho Bank. It's like one of the three biggest banks in Japan right now. And next, this new bank needed companies it could lend money to. It's a new bank, so you need a business. So they were short of companies to lend money to. So Eiichi kept popping out these mega infrastructure companies that still exist now, like Tokyo Gas, Tokyo Electricity, Tokyo Marine Insurance, Japan Railways. So he founded all these things. And thinking about this, this really sounds like Japanese mythology, if you know anything about it. It's the mythology about how Japan began when Izanagi and Izanami, the Adam and Eve of Japan, kept giving birth to the god of this island and that island, the god of rivers, the wind, houses, roofs, toilets, everything. That's what Shibusawa Eiichi did in a matter of a few decades. He was literally like the founding gods of Japan. So I'm just saying, if somebody enshrined Eiichi in Saitama Prefecture near his hometown, there will be a huge shift in traffic on New Year's Eve. Every business person would go there to pray for luck in business, and that will solve Saitama Prefecture's long-time struggle to attract tourists. They've tried many things. Chiba has Disneyland, and Kanagawa has Hakone and Yokohama. There are so many tourist attractions. But Saitama, what does Saitama have? They have now have a bonsai town and a Moomin village, if you know what that is. So I think what they need is a Shibusawa Eiichi shrine. But of course, we all know that what business people need to do before wishing for luck is to be sunao. Now, right? Sunao, being sunao, at least in Japan, in the Japanese business world, it's very, very important to be sunao. And given that the person you are going to be Snow to is a trustable, wise man or woman, being Snow doesn't mean being obedient or submissive. Being Snow, I think, means leveraging that superior person's knowledge and experience and learning a package lesson from him or her. And that superior person was probably Snow in his or her youth too, which means he or she absorbed the product of all the knowledge and experience of all the preceding Snow people in history. So you're leveraging the history of people who knew better, this long history of people who knew better. And most of the time, these people are willing to pass their knowledge onto you for free, or even you can get paid to learn from them when you work at a company. So I think I always tell myself to be Snow and listen up to your boss. And they may sometimes be wrong, but they are demonstrating their educated guesses. So there are lessons to learn from that too. So at least in Japan, it's important to keep in mind that there's always something to learn from your superiors. I call it the "hai ganbarimasu" mindset. It goes a long way. So let us be Snow, and that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm glad you're talking about Sunao, because that's a word I always struggled to translate. And as you mentioned, if you look in the dictionary, it'll say honest, pure, obedient, and in the Western mind, honest and obedient doesn't necessarily fit in the same category, right? And I feel like you helped me find maybe a better way to explain it to people, to Westerners. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. So a key ingredient is being open-minded, but also being a critical thinker, but still being open-minded enough and congenial enough to accept what you believe is true. But maybe also, if you feel that there's some things that are wrong, especially Japanese society, and when you're dealing with a superior, in most cases, you're probably better off not challenging necessarily what you think is wrong, but absorbing and, like you said, being a sponge and accepting the good things you can learn about it. Is that an accurate characterization in your mind, Chota?
Right. Yeah. Doesn't matter if what you are trying to absorb is right. It can be wrong, but yeah, I experienced something similar to what you just said. I think I was always, again, I had that I must be the smart boy and I know it all, and in my day job, and in the company I work with, and the president of the company assigns a project for me, to set up a new service or something, and then I do the research, and then I find out that the president's view of or the business he was thinking of, he thinks it has potential, but looking at my research results, there's no potential. So I'm feeling he's completely wrong. And at that time, I didn't really listen to him, or I actually conceded. Actually, I was not Snow, but I conceded because he was the boss. Okay, you're the boss. Whatever. I don't care if it fails. It's your fault. You accepted it, and then the business failed. But right now, so there was this long period of time where I was kind of against listening to whatever the president was saying. But lately, I wouldn't say we're best friends, but I think we understand each other the best in the company. I tried to get into his shoes, his mindset, and then I started seeing why he made certain decisions, or he saw certain visions, and it really helped to understand the business better and the direction he wants to go. And I completely agreed with the direction he wanted to go. So I don't know why it happened or when it happened, but anyway, when I started feeling Snow towards whatever he was saying, I try to accept what he's saying, try to think what is behind his words. Then I started seeing his personality. I started seeing he was a really nice guy. He's really trying his best to grow the business and secure jobs for all of us. I work in like a medium-sized company, so Yeah, it's I don't know. It doesn't bear fruit immediately sometimes, but I'm very happy right now that I work for the company I work for right now, because I can see what I shouldn't say I can see what the president is seeing. He sees farther than me, but I feel I am in agreement with the company's direction. So you feel that yarigai, right? Working in a company. So being Snow, it brings a lot of different benefits at timings you would never expect. So I don't know. That's what I feel.
Yeah, I agree. And I've mentioned this many times here, but I worked in manufacturing for many years. And I also, in my opinion, the best Japanese managers I worked with were sunao toward subordinates or people below them in rank. And I saw it, especially, in the factory when a mistake would be made and the Japanese manager would go out with the intention of finding out what the problem was. And oftentimes, if this was in the US, the American operator would think they were going to be blamed. And when this occurred, when the Japanese manager was aware of this, their reaction too often was, no, if anybody's going to be blamed, it's me, because my job is to provide the conditions so you can succeed. And I'm here to learn from you, the operator. So they didn't look at themselves as being smarter than the operator. On the contrary, they looked at the operator as having the most experience doing that job every day. And they sincerely valued the feedback and input that the operators gave. And that drove the Kaizen, the continuous improvement. And I remember the American operators being quite pleasantly surprised when they found out what the intentions were when the Japanese manager would go out there. So that kind of fits, at least in my mind. Does that make sense?
Right? Yeah. It's like I have had a similar experience recently. It's like a new employee we hired in the Philippines. Um, it's still his first month, and then he's not following instructions. He's not the type that follows instructions word for word naturally, and we keep telling him that he needs to follow instructions, but he always fails to do that, and the result is, as expected, not great. So he's not producing any output. He's not contributing much. So he feels guilty of that. I think he's trying. I'm trying to trust him. Um, he feels guilty, and whenever we have a one-on-one meeting, you can see the looks in his eyes, that he's afraid. He's trying to cover up something, because I think he was conditioned to do that, to survive until now. And
Yes.
that's like a, what do you call it, a defense mechanism, to hide something and come up with an excuse. Like he was late for a meeting, and the internet was not working. There was a typhoon, and then I know there is no typhoon in the Philippines right now, for example. So yeah, so I don't know how work is like in other countries and other cultures, but at least in Japan, covering up your mistakes doesn't really help. I mean, we're trying to fix problems together, and we need to find what the problem is together, and we need the help of the person who was in charge to give us information on what was actually happening, what he or she observed, and that's how we fix problems. And we're not trying to blame one person. So yeah, I think being Snow, right, being Snow is not something that one person could do. The superior needs to avail an environment where beings now will feel right or feel okay. So they need to feel safe, that it's safe to be now, safe to be honest about your mistakes, being honest about your opinions, right? And then right, you need this protection from the superior. So in, I think, Confucianism or Japanese thoughts, being a superior carries a lot of responsibility in that sense too, I feel.
Yeah, I agree. And, in the US, there's a very cynical term. I'll clean it up for the audience, but basically the poop rolls downhill, which means responsibility tends to go downhill. Something goes bad, you blame your subordinate blames their subordinate, and then at the end, the person at the bottom of the rung gets blamed for everything. And, you know, again, I can only speak from my manufacturing experience, but it was the opposite. The responsibility rolled uphill, and the higher up in the hierarchy you were, which is completely consistent with Confucianism, the higher up you were, the heavier the burden of responsibility. It doesn't mean you take all the responsibility, but you take the biggest chunk of it. And that mentality, I think, served the Japanese well in excelling in manufacturing, because certainly in the case of the people in the factory working, they were treated quite well, because Japanese management said, our job is to provide the conditions so they can succeed. And if they don't succeed, then we obviously, the leaders, did not provide the necessary and sufficient conditions. So that's totally consistent with my experience.
Right. Yeah.
By the way, good morning, Yuka. Thank you for coming up on stage.
Oh, okay. Oh, hey, Yuka.
Hi, nice to see you again, Kyoto-san.
Is that you?
So, yeah, it was very refreshing to hear this word "sunao" in a historical business setting. To me, sunao is a personality trait, not like a character trait, but it was very refreshing. And then, so I have two questions. So, question one. So last time, I believe we talked about folklore. So going forward, and I'm excited to hear this is the first of many, the episodes to come. So we are going to talk about more of the historical figures. That's not question number one. And number two. So this like application of the term "sunao" in like a historical or business setting. So when you are studying about this guy, I shouldn't call him the guy, but I'm sorry, his name escaped me. But this person, you thought about this term "sunao" yourself, or somebody describe him as "sunao"? Because I'm asking because it's very fascinating to apply this term "sunao" to describe this historical figure. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Yes. Question number one. Yes, I plan to share people from Japanese history, and it's because it's what I enjoy doing is to look at the person's personality. So I'm trying to put together the dots, the facts that we have right now of those people, and put them together to form a personality, not form a personality. So figure out the personality of that person, the personality that person must have had. And that will be the central topic of this series, I believe. And number two, Shibutao Eiichi. So yes, I read a lot about his history from I don't know, 3 or 4 books. And they pretty much said the same thing. It's about facts, what happened to him, what did he make happen. But no, none of them said about his personality. It said that he was altruistic, but nobody said that he was Snow. But putting myself in his shoes, all these 180 degrees he made at least 3, and they were really, really big. There's no way that he was not Snow, I believe, and that's why I'm sharing it today. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. No, I think it's a great and very creative way to use this term, because to me, snow is like willingness to, admit, I'm wrong. So,
Right.
but then, like you said, to me, snow, and maybe he was snow and he was flexible, and then, you described him in many ways, and I think those, characteristics apply to him. But anyway, thank you. He's a fascinating figure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Right. Oh, let me answer one question from Breno Kobayashi. He said, like the Japanese mythology comparison about Izanagi and Izanami, what would be the Amaterasu in modern Japan? That's a very interesting question. Amaterasu is another, I think she's the granddaughter. I think she's the daughter or granddaughter of Izanagi, or, well, at least Izanagi are her ancestors. And Amaterasu is again one of the founding gods of Japan. She's the god of light, sunlight, right? And the famous episode she has is she was a little depressed, and she snuck herself into a cave and then prisoned herself with a large rock. And then, because she's the god of the sun, and she went into a cave, the sun went out. And we think Japanese historians think that probably there was a solar eclipse, and people pray that she come out of the cave, but she didn't. So this other god, Ame no Uzume, I think, she pulled off a naked dance, and then everyone was really making a enjoying themselves right outside the cave. So Amaterasu kind of peeked outside to see what was going on, because she liked parties too. And then that moment, like, these two other gods pushed the cave open, and then the solar eclipse was over. So that was their episode. But what would be Amaterasu in modern Japan? So Amaterasu is basically a female god. I forgot to say, yes, she's a female god, and the other episode she's famous for is about story with her interaction with her brother Susano. Her brother is a troublemaker, and he's mighty, he's handsome and everything, but he basically gets kicked out of the god's world because he was such a big hassle to handle. So Amaterasu, kind of rules the god's world, not for him, but on behalf of all the other gods. So I think in the modern Japanese world, in the modern Japanese world, it's a little difficult. At least several centuries later, around the 1000 AD, there were actually many female emperors who ruled Japan. Some were actually emperors officially. Some were pseudo emperors. So basically, something like similar to what happened in Egypt many times. So the next emperor is too young; it's like 7 years old, so he can't rule. So the mother or the mother-in-law would take over and rule on behalf of that young emperor, or the shogun's wife. The shogun himself, he's not very keen on politics, so the shogun's wife takes over and rules Japan, and that often happened in Japan. So, who's Amaterasu in the modern Japanese world? I'm not sure, but I think Japanese wives in general are the Amaterasu of modern Japan. There are many things that the Japanese ojisans, the Japanese husbands, are not capable of. Because none of us are perfect, and when that happens, the wife takes over and rules over the family, rules over the neighborhood, and rules over the company. So I don't know if that answers your question. I wish I could have a better answer prepared, but all right. Yeah.
Actually, I really like that answer. Somebody else described the role of a Japanese housewife as the CEO of the house, and that certainly applies in my family.
That's right, in most families. I mean, I think it's changed now. But last time I checked on a survey in, I think, 2010 or something, still then, I think 40% of households in Japan, the finances of 40% of Japan, Japanese households were controlled by the wife. So even if they, both of them work, it's a dual income family. Even if it's a dual income family, in most cases, in 40% of the time, the wife is the CEO and CFO of the family, and the husband gets an allowance, like 1,000 yen a day or something like that, and that's how they live. Still now in Japan.
Yep, we're part of the 40%.
Oh.
And if anybody ever wants to pay me for something I do, I say just pay it to my wife, because she's going to take it from me anyway. So cut out the middleman.
That is so sweet, Tim, that you don't take any commission as a middleman. Sorry, Kyoto, please go ahead.
No, just clapping. Well, there was something interesting that Tim mentioned earlier about taking responsibility, right? The upper management or your boss basically takes responsibility for any mishaps that occur below him or her. And that's how it works in Japan, modern Japan right now. But actually, it was reversed in the samurai world, there's a rave on like samurai and their mindsets, their philosophy is great, and it's not all great. Whenever some mishap occurred in the samurai world, a scapegoat was prepared from the staffers, among the staffers, and he got his head chopped off on behalf of the head of the samurai clan or the samurai government. So before it started changing around the end, where the Tokugawa Yoshinobu I mentioned, the 15th and last shogun, around his time, things were reversed. He is considered not great shogun because he kind of ended the shogunate after 260 years, and he's responsible for that. But basically, what he did was take responsibility for the lack of change or the lack of innovation the samurai world was making during the 260 years. He took full responsibility for that, I believe, in hindsight, as a result. So I think things start to change from him. And now, yes, on TV, I don't watch TV right now, but the last time I checked on TV, whenever there was a problem occurring, whenever a company was responsible for a big problem that affected society, the upper management would line up in front of the camera and apologize and bow deeply in front of them. So that's how it works now. But it was not always like that. So Japan was not as beautiful as that before, once upon a time.
I would venture to say that, yes, that thinking has probably taken root, certainly in manufacturing. Again, that's the only world I can speak of. But not in politics. I think politics, maybe that's universal. People like to find those scapegoats.
Right, because replacing a big an upper management figure who has accumulated all this experience and all this, what do you call it, credibility, all this power, replacing that person with somebody else, it's a huge loss. So I think it was rational for them in the past, the samurai world, and in the politics world right now, to sacrifice somebody else. So maybe it's not like the samurais were heartless beings, but yeah, I guess it's I can't say it's inevitable, but it happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens indeed. And if you allow me to go to the room chat once again, so there is a comment by Janusz. Obedience has its own limitation. Blind obedience to superiors in creating unspeakable cruelty in the history. In the last letter to family before hanging Rudolf House, they asked his children. Oh, Janusz, I'm sorry. I guess that there are some typing mistakes here.
Yeah, I think I get the gist of what.
Okay, please go ahead. Yes, Tim. Yes.
No. In the last letter to his family before hanging Rudolf Hoss, he asked his children, "Don't blindly follow superior, right, or beliefs. There should be free and critical thinking." Which, yeah, I understand. There's a lot of truth to that.
Right. So I think what he's mentioning is, of course, if you follow your superiors blindly, sometimes it leads to Nazism, for example, right? So you need to, like I was mentioning in the talk earlier about Shibusawa Eiichi, he basically was only Sunao to people who he felt was more intelligent than him and knew better than he did, and his motive was not terror. If a superior is ordering you to follow his directives in the form of terror, then yeah, you really need to watch out, and what you need to do is run. I think, yeah. So it's important that, again, to create environment where being Sunao is permitted and is safe to do and is encouraged. So it doesn't go one. It's not a one unidirectional thing that needs to happen here. It has to be two-directional. And yeah, so it's a different relationship, I think. Yeah, we need to be careful to not blindly follow superiors. Be now to superiors that you believe is worthy of respect, and give your full respect to that kind of person, I guess. All right. And Bhavya-san.
And just on the theme of Sunao, I was trying to think of some modern business leaders in Japan who fit that that description. And one of my business heroes was Kazuma Tateshi. He's the founder of Omron, and his philosophy was, it's called the theory of provided conditions, and it was basically he put all the onus or most of the onus on leadership to provide conditions to make people, to help them to succeed, to ensure they succeed. And if they don't, then you have to reflect and do hansei and, figure out how to change things so you do get that desired result. And I believe that Sunao is an essential ingredient to stimulate people to sincerely reflect. And without reflection, there's no improvement. So in some ways, I think it's baked into the best management principles that I've observed working with Japan for 44 years. Just my opinion.
Oh, sorry. No, Kyoto-san, are you going to say something? If you aren't, I have a quick question that if I can throw in, appreciate it. I know, Maya, you have to close the room in 2 minutes, but can I throw in the one last question?
Oh, please.
Sure.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. So again, and I'm still sort of struggling to sort of, put my arm around this term in the business setting. Sorry, I'm kind of slow learner. So I'm just curious, is this the first time that you talked about this concept of being Sunao in, broad business environment setting? And if not, what kind of reaction do you get from audience? Like,
This is the first time I talked about being Snow in a business context today. And the response I got was the responses we got today, I guess.
okay, I'm very curious though, because it's very refreshing and I never thought about using this term Snow in this way. That's why I'm really, I wonder how people react to this term Snow. It's very hard to describe and hard to translate this term. And then probably some people use this term differently in the different circumstances. So I'm very curious, and then I hope you do this more often to a different type of audience and let us know how
Right.
people react. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, I think this is controversial because it is, I think, based on the Japanese mindset, rather, that your fate cannot be really changed. It's like nature. You cannot you don't know when earthquakes occur, and when an earthquake occurs, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to pray that you're in the right spot when the earthquake occurs. And as opposed to, I think, I don't want to be too stereotypical, but in Western thought, you forge your own fate. You find answers yourself, and you build your own path. So I think it's controversial in that sense. But in the Japanese business world, I think being Snow is what is raved, what is expected and encouraged. And Japan, it's not the biggest economy in the world, but it has become it is what is it now? It's like third or fourth biggest in GDP. So it works to a certain extent. So that's how Japanese people or society thinks. I just want to throw that in there. Yeah, I know it's controversial. Yes. All right.
I'm sure it's a controversial. I don't go that far, but it's an interesting use. Thank you.
Thank you.
And actually, one more point, Kyoto, the fact that you introduced the word, but then told a story to illustrate what it means is a lot more effective than just giving a dictionary definition. So thank you very much for that. That helped me a lot.
Yes.
Oh, me too.
Tell a sensitive story.
Yes, thank you, Kyoto. And I do appreciate the whole story as an explanation to the term or the word sunao because this is something very typically Japanese, I believe, and I also struggled to understand what exactly it means. As Bhavia commented in the room chat, so thank you very much for this insightful talk. It is really important to know this, especially for foreigners who come from different cultural backgrounds and work and live here in Japan. Thank you very much, Kyota. Of course, we are looking forward to having you here again next month with the second episode of Facepalming Lessons from Japanese History. Be with us next time again so that we continue being here together and working together as well. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in today. We will be on air next week on Wednesday at 8 a.m. Japan time again, so join us. Until then, you can find us at japanexpertinsights.com and our YouTube channel. If you want to stay informed about our upcoming events, follow us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn or Twitter. Again, we are looking forward to your joining us next week. Until then, stay well and make the best of the day. See you!